A few miles to the south at Netheravon, gliding is replaced by parachuting on another wartime airfield, which is the home of the Army Parachute Association. This is quite appropriate, as during the war, Netheravon was central to the development of Britain's airborne forces. In June 1940, following the success of German paratroopers, Winston Churchill gave the order to raise and train a complement of 5,000 British airborne troops. In time, this led to the formation of the 1st Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, based at Kiwi Barracks, Bulford, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Down.
When the Parachute Regiment was formed, the drill standard went up and there was a lot of PT and everything else. And then the balloon arrived, which was to go into Beacon Hill. This was used by the airborne units to do parachute jumps before they went for air jumps from planes. The balloon was tethered at about 400 feet. The men would jump out on a static line which went for about 100 and odd feet, and then the parachute would open and they would drop the last 200 feet to the ground, again untethered. They had to do 2 night jumps, and I can always remember at night being woken up by the screams as they left the balloon, because dropping into space for 200 feet before it opened, you very seldom got anybody who could do it without making a shout or a scream as they went down.
Jeff Baker served with the Parachute Regiment during the war and was stationed at Bulford.
Well, I was in a peculiar regiment, the Middlesex Regiment, 70th Battalion, which was all young kids, some of them from Borstal, and it was shambles. A notice came round asking for volunteers for the paras. I volunteered.
The paras, even more so then, were the elite, weren't they? Would you say that?
Well, they were supposed to be, yes. We felt we were anyway.
His wife was lodging in the town, and he has particularly fond memories of his 21st birthday.
We went to Stonehenge, had a picnic on one of the stones, and she brought a few presents and a bit of food. Very nice indeed, that was.
What did you do on your days off?
I think we used to go into Salisbury and go for a ride and that sort of thing, go for a walk.
But paratroopers themselves were, of course, only part of the airborne setup. The soldiers would need aircraft to fly them to their drop zones, while others would be ferried in gliders towed behind the powered aircraft. Collectively, all of these various elements constituted the 1st Airborne Division, commanded by Major General Frederick Boy Browning, from his headquarters at Cirencott House, about 2 miles north of Bulford. And later it was also the headquarters of the 6th Airborne Division under Major General Richard Gale. It was from here that the airborne assault on D-Day to secure the left flank of the Allied invasion front was meticulously planned and mounted. Having formed the Parachute Regiment, the job of transporting the paras to the battlefield was given to numbers 38 and 46 groups of Army Cooperation Command of the Royal Air Force, both of which were headquartered here at RAF Netheravon. During training exercises on Salisbury Plain, converted Whitworth Whitley bombers were used to ferry the men to their drop zones, while Hawker Hector biplanes were employed to tow the Hotspur gliders. Although the personnel of 38 and 46 groups were from the RAF, the men who piloted the gliders were drawn from the Army. They belonged to the Glider Pilot Regiment, which was formed in December 1941. The reason for this being that once they had landed their gliders on the battlefield, their job as aviators was effectively over. They would then have to integrate into the troops on the ground as infantrymen. A training depot for the regiment was established at Tills Head, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel J.F. Rock, now the site of Westdown Camp. Discipline at Tills Head was legendary, as Rock transformed his volunteers into an elite force. On the 16th of April 1942, Winston Churchill was treated to a demonstration at Netheravon to see how his plans were progressing. During a full-scale exercise, troops jumped out of 12 Whitleys while others were towed to the landing zone in Hotspurs. Although the demonstrations suffered from a number of setbacks, Churchill was said to be suitably impressed with the results, and the programme continued. All of this training eventually led to D-Day, and as far as the airborne assault was concerned, Wiltshire still had a major role to play. In preparation for D-Day, the squadrons of 38 and 46 groups were dispersed around a number of airfields in southern England, including 2 in Wiltshire, Keevil near Trowbridge and Blakehill Farm near Cricklade. At Keevil, 2 squadrons had been equipped with short Stirling bombers, adapted for carrying paratroopers and pulling Horsa gliders. Another squadron at Blakehill Farm had been supplied with Douglas C-47 Dakotas for a similar role. It was the responsibility of the units at Keevil to ferry the soldiers of the 6th Airborne Division to their objectives of capturing and holding the bridges across the Caen Canal and River Orne in order to protect the eastern flank of the main invasion force as it landed by sea. Just before midnight on the 5th of June 1944, 46 Stirlings with gliders in tow took off from Keevil with 806 paratroopers on board. Having dropped these in France, they came back to Wiltshire before returning with reinforcements. These troops succeeded in pushing the Germans back to win a bloody but significant victory. From Blakehill Farm, the Dakotas of 233 Squadron carried the men of the 9th Parachute Battalion, who had been tasked with disabling the Merville battery, which threatened the left flank of the landing beaches. Once again, the force was a combination of paratroopers and glider-borne troops. However, a number of gliders landed so far from the objective that their passengers were unable to take part in the battle. Even so, after mustering roughly 1/4 of the 600 men he had set out with, Lieutenant Colonel Terence Otway, the CO of 9 Para, successfully put the German guns out of action, but with the loss of 60 of his own men.
Keevil, they were very active during the war. They had lots of different types of aircraft down there. Towards the end of the war, very, very large 4-engined aircraft used to take off from there and come across here very low. Of course, they were carrying paratroops. They used to come one after the other, about 4 at a time.
Keevil and Blakehill Farm had played crucial parts in the Allied success, but it wouldn't be long before their runways sprang into action again. In September 1944, their squadrons were given the even bigger task of helping to carry the 1st Airborne Division into Holland for the ill-fated Operation Market Garden. The men would be dropped 60 miles behind enemy lines in order to capture and hold, until relieved, the bridge across the Rhine at Arnhem. At the same time, but setting out from other airfields, 2 American Airborne Divisions, the 82nd and the 101st, also landed in Holland to capture bridges at Grave, Nijmegen and Eindhoven. The idea was to form a road link along which a British armoured column would race to link up with and relieve the paratroopers at Arnhem. From Keevil alone, on the 17th of September, 50 Stirlings and 130 Horsa gliders set off for their drop zones. These were some distance from the town, and the paratroopers had a long march before eventually reaching the bridge area. Also, the German strength was far greater than anticipated, primarily because of the presence of a panzer division. Over the next few days, the aircraft from Keevil and Blakehill Farm would deliver supplies to the paras on the ground, but sadly, none of the radios they had been issued with were working, and unknown to the British pilots, the Germans had overrun the drop zones, so the supplies were being delivered directly into enemy hands. These resupply missions continued until it was finally decided to abandon the whole operation and withdraw the remaining ground forces back across the Rhine on the night of September the 25th and 26th. Of the 10,095 troops that had gone into Arnhem, less than 3,000 would make it back. Operation Market Garden was one of the costliest disasters of the war for the British, and the bridge at Arnhem, which the Parachute Regiment had fought over for 9 gruelling days against overwhelming odds, became known as the Bridge Too Far. Geoff Baker was at Arnhem, but how effective had his training in Wiltshire been?
Nothing can really prepare you, but it showed us the sort of thing we might expect.
How did you feel when you actually jumped out of an aeroplane for the first time?
Anticipatory. Scared.
Before the real thing, how many jumps did you do?
7 training, and then we went to North Africa, and we did 1 there.
What was it like when you got to Arnhem?
We landed quite happily and cheerfully and consolidated and so on, and then we marched towards Arnhem overnight. But we couldn't get far because there were too many Germans about. First thing, we had to clear out a warehouse, came back up the slope from the river, and there was a half-track with a red cross on it, and we thought, oh, well, he's all right. And we ignored him, but he opened up with a machine gun on us, wounded 2 or 3 of us. So that was when I got wounded, and that was it. I didn't last very long. The second day, that was. They took us away to hospital, Dutch barracks and various odds and ends of places, hotels, first aid posts, and then eventually, yes, I was moved back into Germany. Well, I got gangrene in my leg. We had our own British doctors there, fortunately, and they amputated it. And the Americans arrived and released us and were flown home.
Today,